A very good afternoon to everyone present. So welcome to this post-lunch session, and I hope we are able to keep everybody awake after the heavy lunch. And I am here mostly as a maybe from the background of anthropology, since we are connected with people and cultures and livelihood. As Sir, our Honorable Vice Chancellor in the inaugural session had mentioned, the protagonist of the actual climate change people involved in climate change aspects and conservation. I am here mainly as a moderator who, as I have been introduced, my main area of interest is anthropological gerontology, non-communicable diseases, etc. But recently, of course, my interest has shifted to climate change as well, where one of my students, scholars, is working on resilience and of the community towards disaster, in the Mahasa areas, because this is one aspect that we cannot ignore, or we cannot really turn a blind eye to. So what since the beginning, since the morning session, some very key aspects have been identified. Like our Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir had mentioned about the micro and the macro aspects. So as I come from the anthropology background, what I feel that yes, there is a macro big picture that we all look at where about conserving and preserving the third pole, and also there is the micro aspect where we speak or work at the micro level, because as an anthropologist I have to think about micro level. And what I feel, and which also Guwahati University endorses, is that because when you work at the micro level, I think it's just like the jigsaw puzzles coming together. When all the micro level ecosystems are taken care of, the jigsaw puzzle will come together and take care of the macro system together, in totality. I think that's what it's a kind of a idealistic picture, but still I think that can be one way of looking at it. And what we have felt as, in what I sincerely feel is that in most of our situations, just Eastern Himalayan and those what we call as the Himsagar and the Third Pole region, but that it has been declared as a fragile zone for a very long time. And this has been, known to us, but somehow we have not really paid the due attention that was required. So what we are now doing is mostly the kind of post-destructive what we call corrections that we are doing. But I think our approach should be more towards what we can say preventive or conservationist kind of an approach. And coming from an anthropological background, what I feel that we all know about the sustainable development goals and how communities can work towards sustainability from all perspectives. What I feel is that when we are looking at conservation or preservation and these aspects of wetlands or any other aspect, we have to understand or try to understand the indigenous knowledge that are connected to that belong to the people who live around these wetlands or are dependent on these different ecosystems, because their indigenous knowledge are mostly aimed at, or mostly, what we can say as the concepts of sustainability, concepts of conservation are ingrained into their cultural aspects. So if we can identify these aspects and make them, we can use this knowledge also of course, in conjunction with some of the developmental aspects that can be put together. So this can be used for the conservation as well as the preservation mechanism. So in the indigenous knowledge system, and because the people who are living and using this wetlands or any other ecosystem that we know of, can really, this knowledge can help us conserve, because they have been living in these ecosystems, using the resources, using them for therapy, using them for sustenance for so long. Their knowledge about the resources is something which is unimaginable. So this is something we need to take care of and use them together along with the other the developmental aspects, and somehow find a unitary path to attain what we are looking for. And for, what Mr. Saurabh Roy in the morning had said that for working in this area, we need to have a right mix of emotion and intelligence. I think that is one thing we cannot really deny, because unless and until we have the right kind of conviction or the kind of belief that we need to work in this area, we cannot really go ahead with this. So here my role today here is as a moderator, so I'll not speak much about this. I think we are all aware of the distinguished panelists here. So as a moderator, we see that we have about an hour time to hold the session. So for each of the speakers, the organizers have already identified a specific area on which they can speak. So I think we are aware of it already. So what I think I'll do, we can maybe assign 10 minutes for one. We are 4 speakers, so maybe a little more than 10 minutes, 12 or 13 minutes maybe we can give, and then we can give some time for discussion as well. So shall we proceed in that way? Okay. So shall I go by the list that has been provided? Okay, so as per the organizers have made the arrangements. So first speaker, I'm happy to invite Chimi Ringjin, sir, from WWF Bhutan. Sir, can you kindly, you can speak from there.
Thank you very much. I work based in Brooklyn, so sure. While we were having a discussion, audience has it's true, and I think it's a relief for us because we have less time compared to the audience speakers that face that situation in the morning. First of all, thank you, Balipara Foundation, for inviting me to be part of this program. Before I go into the details of what I'm going to speak, perhaps I think it would be fitting for me to ask the question of how do you, for instance, or we as a group, related to river system and wetland system? I think that's a very important question. Oftentimes, we think of wetland. I think the good example would be a lake, river system, of course. The river that we see, oftentimes we have this imagination of waterfalls, beautiful lakes, waters in the plain, and of course, high in the mountains, in the forest roofs, and all those things. So there's always almost a romanticism notion about these things, and we tend to forget the significance of it. We think these systems as out there, not necessarily attached to us in daily life form. But for me, I think it's more than that. For me, it's the water that is on the table in front of us. It is the electricity, the energy that the river system, wetland systems is key to it. And it is this energy system, that is allowing us to facilitate and have these discussions through technologies, mic, phone, everything. So that is what wetland is in essence. I think it has gone beyond the traditional role of providing habitats and other things, but I think it's in providing comfort to all of us. So if we are able to connect it, wetland, in that manner, then perhaps I think I would like to reflect on what Professor Sandra mentioned, the emotion and intelligence. I think this can actually come together. So with this intro, let me begin with the wetland and river system in the context of Bhutan. Why integrated river basin management, wetland management is important, and how does it connect to transboundary ecosystem in the large landscape. And then lastly, coming to the question of what is the role of people. At the end of the day, I think everything needs to be connected to people, because we are the makers, we are the destroyers, and I think we are the biggest ecosystem engineers. We have talked about elephant being a large ecosystem engineers, but frankly speaking, I think we are the one, and I think we have a responsibility to be a good, let's say, stewards of engineers, so that our ecosystem is there for many years to come. Just last week, I had a session on, I was a moderator as well as keynote speaker on conservation technology and how it connects with all the different parts that we are connected to. And I talked about why conservation technology is so important for Bhutan in the context of Bhutan facing ice latency paradox. And what is that paradox? If you look at Bhutan, Bhutan is a coastal boy. 60 to 70% forest cover, 52% in the land under protected areas. And like in one of the foremost countries being a carbon negative country, right? So these are some of the images that we live through. But if you look at in the current context, the paradox that we are facing is, Bhutan is the highest per capita water, almost 100,000 meter cube per person per year, which is like 60 or 70 times higher than what India has, and almost 10 times higher than what Nepal has. So why do we have to worry about water? Why do we have to worry about basin management? It's almost like we have resources out here to scoop it, but that's not the case. If you look at access, I think we are most affected. So if you look at, so in terms of the river system that we have in Bhutan, I think it has been very good for hydropower generation, but not necessarily for other economic activities, agriculture, sanitation, drinking water. That has been a challenge. And likewise, when you look at the mountain ecosystem, overlaid that with river and wetland system, it's very complex. It's not like in plain areas where you dig a well and get water. Himalayan mountain areas, it doesn't work that way, and it is probably experience of Sikkim and many of the northeast countries. So it was the basis of having this integrated water resource management as a framework for planning. And since then, I think it was very good in terms of lessons. I think we have had very good success. If you look at the climate adaptation issues that we're facing as a Bhutan, it's all related to water. It's either too much rain or too less rain. So we have flood, we have drought. And related to it, of course, forest fire in winter. Again, it's all related to water. So integrated water resource management has helped us to to be used as a core framework climate adaptation in Bhutan, and it has been mainstream in almost all the districts. It has also helped to bring the stakeholders together because the legal framework ensures, almost forces the communities and stakeholders to come together, which is important. And I want to reflect back on the question of why waste management in some of the countries are failing when Bhutan talked about putting water down as such. Regulation is important, but at the same time, application of regulation is important. So I think these are some of the important lessons that we have learned. But having said that, dealing with water resources in mountain ecosystem is not very difficult. I mean, it's very difficult when you are talking about, groundwater system, which is not easy to train. We are talking about so many other areas that is not very straightforward. That brings to the question of why is this transboundary cooperation necessary? I mean, Bhutan has water resources, but I think when we talk about wetland, river system, I think we need to look at it from the lens, from two lenses. Number one is, of course, the conservation significance. Many of the high altitude wetland lakes and everything, I think they are important transit habitat for migratory species of particular birds. And then in Bhutan, I think it has played a very important role in terms of facilitating that. So many of the birds, they rest in those Himalayan highland that ultimately migrate to India or Bangladesh. And of course, we need to look at the economic aspects of what these, wetland and river systems serves. So I told the example of how we are connected to the energy system, the food system, everything. So I think that way it is, it is a transboundary in nature. That's where I think the importance of collaboration between Bhutan, Nepal, India, Bangladesh becomes very important because what happens on upstream affects, which is for the very good times. You are aware of it. One thing I want to highlight, we talk about education awareness. I think this comes across many of the subjects that we talk about. I think in the morning, people talk about and when we talk about Himalayas, you will often hear the terms such as water towers of the town. And immediate image when we talk about water tower is to see these mountains, a glacial covered mountains, which we assume will have a problem. When we say that, many people don't know that many of these wetlands, streams, they have a headwater in forest, not necessarily connecting glacier. In Bhutan, 40% of river actually originates from forest. So I think that is the point of, I think, important that we understand. So it's not really the glaciers. Of course, glaciers and snows are important, but at the same time, we need to understand the role of forest that plays in terms of the wetland. Lastly, let me talk briefly on, and this was a question that I was given, what role communities play in monitoring climate-induced changes in wetland ecosystems. So I pondered on this question for a while. I'm an agricultural extensions as a profession, so that's how I started my career. So as an agricultural extensionist, you're supposed to deal with the farm, listen to them, and that's how I sort of evolved professionally. So for me, the straight question was, as Professor was saying, allowing them to listen to the farmers. We often, because we think that we are literate, we have a college degree, PhD degree, master's degree certificate. We often go to the farmers with certain tools that we think serves the best interest of the communities. But if you talk about the climate change patterns, they are the first one that notices changes, a pattern that has changed in that community. So I think it's very important to put farmers really at the centers, community leaders at the centers, but at the same time in the forefront. So I think that's where the importance of this traditional knowledge systems comes to play. As long as we're able to have this conversation where we put their knowledge in the forefront in terms of, let's say, monitoring system, in terms of outcome metrics, in terms of output metrics, believe me, I think the ownership of will be much more high. And at the same time, after that, we're trying to implement the success of it will be much more higher. So I will stop here, and thank you very much. I hope I got back to platform clarity. Thank you. Thank you.
Ranjin, he had really stated how integrated water resource management has become the core in Bhutan's mechanism for mitigating climate change. And I am very happy to hear that it's the role of how we listen to the farmers about what their inputs are. I think it's very true that it is the ground level people who are the real, who feel the impact of the change. Like simple things as rainfall not coming on time, or maybe less rainfall, or maybe more rainfall. These things have an impact on their production as well as how they are dealing with these things. So I think a very well explained aspect of this. Thank you so much. If there are any questions, maybe we can take the questions. We can note down the questions. We can take all the questions at the end. I think that way we can save a little time. So please note down for whom you want the question. Whatever question you have, you can have the question answer session. Thank you so much, sir. So now we can, I invite Dr. Ratin Borman, whose main aspect that was given to him was how major conservation gaps in wetland protection across Northeast India, and how science-driven management support restoration and sustainable use.
For inviting me and part of this. Every time I studied here in God University many years back. So every time I come here, I feel like coming home. Straight away I was told that there are some community members also present at this hall. So I'll mix my language, both Assamese and English, so that the community members can understand what we discuss. As the Mother Madam says that before I really go to the wetland management, I will share a small experience on wetlands. Many years back, I used to go for bird watching, because I'm a wildlife. I used to go for bird watching in a good wetland and situated next to the district councillor's office. So one of the districts, I do not want to name that district here, but it is in Assam. And my experience is basically based on my experience in Assam. I have worked only in Assam, not in other states. So I used to go to that wetland for bird watching, and I used to see many birds there. And recently Jacana, it's very beautiful bird, nesting there. Bronzing jacanas, lesser fixtail, lots of birds. And of course, there are some vegetations also there in that wetland. Nice, beautiful wetland. And some years back, I met the district commissioner of that district. And he happens to be one of my friends again. And I said that, oh, you are in that district. I used to go for bird watching in the wetland next to your office. And he very proudly said, oh, I have restored that wetland. Restored that wetland. মই তেখেতৰ অফিচৰ কাষতে থকা জলাশয়টো ৱেটলেণ্ডটো বিলটো মই চাব গৈছিলো আগতে, তাত চৰাই চাইছিলো, চৰাই লিষ্টিং কৰিছিলে। হঠাৎ এদিন তেখেতক লগ পালো, তেখেতে ক'লে যে এই ৱেটলেণ্ডটো মই ভাল কৰিলো। When he said that I have restored that wetland, okay, I was happy. Oh, he must have done some very good work. So maybe a couple of months later, I went to that same wetland, and it was totally clean. No vegetation at all, and a nice boundary wall. So that's how he restored it. No birds at all nest gone. So that's the definition of wetland by a senior bureaucrat. They are supposed to be the decision makers. So we need to correct our basic first. Then we need to go for the management. আমি যদি ওয়েটল্যান্ড কি বস্তু বুজিয়ে নাপাওঁ, তেতিয়াহ'লে ওয়েটল্যান্ড মেনেজমেণ্টৰ কথা কি আলোচনা কৰিম? গতিকে you can probably, many of you know, its Dipol village is not far from here. It's just a couple of kilometers away. In my university days, we used to count around 50,000 water birds in the peak winter season now. And that's how that Dipol village has become a Ram society. It's one of our surveys during that time. In the early 90s, I'm talking about. And you go now, it's mainly water, hardly any birds. It's a dumping ground, sewage water ground, whatnot. So that's why I repeat, we need to correct our basic first. We need to understand that wetland is actually the supermarket of biodiversity. You get everything there. If we do not understand wetland, then there is no point of discussing on wetland management. And again, I'm repeating that this is my experience in Assam. I do not know if the other states or other countries are doing better. There are many other countries. I've seen wetlands in other countries also. They're doing fantastic. So we have to correct our basics. Then only we should discuss about, we should take our, first we need to know what is a wetland, and we should have a top-down approach. All the community members, the ground persons, we all know what is a wetland, because we are rice eaters. Rice is mainly grown in wetlands. So community members know everything. If you go and ask the villagers who lives next to that district commissioner's office building, they will say, what the district has done. They have destroyed the wetland actually. They have not restored. But the district commissioner doesn't know that. So we have to have a top-down approach here. Then only you can do something. And fortunately or unfortunately here, politician takes the last call of final call. So we have to make the top bureaucrats and top politicians aware what is a wetland. Then only we may take the next step. So that is on the wetland management. I do not want to go further on that wetland management because we still do not know what is a wetland. And then another gentleman one day asked me that I was attending some other conferences in somewhere else, not in Assam, in Delhi. And he said, how many wetlands do you have in Assam? My reply was, it depends on time. If you come to Assam, from May to August, whole Assam is a wetland. It's not. Because see, it's Assam is a valley, and if you carefully see and think that all our major wetlands are just 10 kilometers either of river bound. And same thing with the Balipara. So I did my PhD on wetlands from Sadia to Dhuri, and all major wetlands where you have, these are all biodiversity powerhouses. They're just 10 kilometers of north or 10 kilometers of south of river bound. So as long as we take care of our main umbilical cord, river Brahmaputra, our wetlands are okay. And now there are some climate people I can see here, and the future of Brahmaputra is also in the question mark. Because there are lots of development activities, some dams and some catchment areas are in trouble. So if we not take care of our main channel, then definitely the wetlands, which are just divided 10 kilometers north and 10 kilometers south of River Brahmaputra, then definitely they will not have good things. My last point. Again, coming back to the first thing, we still consider wetland as wasteland. All our major development projects here in Assam, we plan in wetlands. We just fill the wetlands and do our development projects. So definitely we need development. Again, in many other forms, I do say that we have to redefine the word development. Do Delhi is a developed city, then Guwahati, where you cannot breathe, but you have multi-stories and you have skyscrapers, but you cannot breathe there. For me, Delhi is a dead city. My village is the best place where I get fresh oxygen. If we do not get oxygen, how will we live? So, probably we have to redefine what is development, whether fresh oxygen is development or that 500 our pollution index is development. So with that, I stop here, but definitely I will come back to you. And again, I repeat, I do not want to go to the wetland development, wetland management here because we do not know what is wetlands. So first, we need to know what is wetland. Then we will go for management plans.
Thank you, Dr. Borman. It's good to know that you're an alumnus of our university. I happen to be one as well. And he has pointed out very first that we need to understand what wetlands are first. And the other term that he used, I liked it very much, is the supermarket of biodiversity. And it's very true. We have so many different aspects, like not just flora, fauna, so much biodiversity, and it becomes a ground for other migratory birds and other things as well. So that's very important thing that you have pointed out, and we are aware of it, but still this is something we need to emphasize. And this, especially in Assam, this fact that you said about considering wetlands as wastelands, I think it's what we are seeing every day. Like how we are destroying the Dipor Bill every day, we like with constructions, with treating it as a place for dumping our waste and everything. So we are not just destroying the wetland, but we are also destroying the biodiversity there. So with this points, he's made his, I think he's emphasized what you wanted to say. And if there's any question you would like to put to him, which you can note down, we'll have it at the end of the session. And I just like to ask if there are the organizers here. Is anyone reporting the session? Is there any reporters here? Hello, reporter. Okay, thank you so much. I think the next speaker, we do not have Dr. Ritesh Kumar. So we have, can we ask Dr. Kaushik, Mr. Kaushik Das from Tata Steel Foundation. And I think the points that you have to speak on has already been made to you. So I think we need to hear from you.
So thank you, Professor Chandra, and a very good afternoon to all my dignitaries and my dear students. Probably this is my first experience standing in front of a group of students, and that too from eminent institute from Guwahati University. So that's a privilege that I've got, and thank you to Balipara Foundation for this. So I'm about to speak about this, the whole of decentralization. How decentralization can empower the communities to preserve the wetlands. Now, when we speak of the decentralization, so the state, let us start. The government has already started thinking. They earlier had this National Wetland Act, and now they have already decentralized to State Wetlands Act. So it's not that this concept government is not thinking. Government has started thinking. But however, the communities, also this indication with the government has not yet happened. I will start speaking from what Mr. Rajin had spoken about the Depot Bill. Is correct. And not only in Assam, in any parts of India, I've traveled far and wide across this whole country. Most of the places have been like this. Even many of the societies where I do live in Jamshedpur, it has been made on this. Probably a wetland, long time back. Why? The earlier so-called communities which were a part of village have now become urbanized. And that social capital has now missed. There is no social capital. The community involvement is gone. So who is making the profit? It is the builders who is making the profit. And I had to pay because I had needed accommodation. So we are all in this whole vicious trap that yes, we are all at fault. Again, I'll go into this top-down approach. There is a need, not only from the top down, there is a need from the bottom up. Both of them are needed. But 73rd and the 74th Amendment Act of the government, which speaks of the people's participation. When we speak of people's participation, government has already made Gram Panchayat. So only in the first section you had heard, Mr. Saul was speaking of Gram Panchayat Development Plan, Village Development Plan. Why? These are the pathways in which the villagers can participate. So these are the institutions that government has already made. Three-tier Panchayati Raj system, with Gram Sabha at the bottom, but people themselves have the right for in a democratic country. It is a government for the people, by the people, and of the people, which many of the people have not yet realized that. Even this decentralized planning process, this decentralized governance in which the people should and can participate, it is giving them the ownership and decentralized decision-making power. And when they get this decision-making power, they act accordingly and even become accountable and responsible. Even the so-called political powers or the decision makers of the state, the people have got more access than you and me like that. Anyway, even the government officials may not have the reach to approach these policymakers and decision makers who are basically the so-called political leaders in the state or in the nation. But these common people, because they are the vote bank, they can have easy approaches. So when we can strengthen this whole process of decentralization, what happens? This access to people with the decision makers and the policy makers becomes much more easier. And these policy makers, also called the decision makers, then become more and more accountable. That is why this decision making and decentralization of the power is more important. The other aspects being, when you have this decentralized decision making, the people, you use the indigenous knowledge. Because as well as the PESA Act, Panchayat Extension and Schedule Areas Act, you find that the traditional leaders, so the traditional governance system, their way of thinking, their traditional knowledge is so important. They are the ones who take the decisions. And so whenever there is a gap or whenever there is a problem with related to this preservation of the wetlands, they can give you the tailored solutions. It's not from the universities, it's not from the so-called big scientific institutions. It's also the common people who will come there and they will themselves give the tailored solutions over them. When they get the tailored solutions, they also become a part of the decision-making process. So that is why this is decentralization is very much important. The next point that I've been asked is that what are livelihood models can strengthen the resilience and reducing the ecological pressure. So the livelihood models, those who are dependent on the wetlands, they would never try to destroy it. Whether you go for the Forest Protection Act, which speaks of the decentralization, whether you go for the Forest Conservation Act, or whether you speak of the National Commission for the Wetland Preservation, they all speak of the grassroots level. That is the person who is there in the ground. You have got wetland meters also now in today's in our country today. So this is very much important. Now, when we speak of this livelihood, how this livelihood can actually strengthen this and reduce the ecological pressure. One such activity that can be taken up is the diversification on the wetlands. Diversification of what? Diversification of the livelihood practices. So just one type of activity rather than that one can go to off-farm and the non-farm activities. That is very much important. Second, what I had already spoken is that the traditional knowledge. So using those traditional knowledges, these wetlands can be used to grow many other things, such as today in the morning we had heard about a sort of plants that grow in the wetlands. They can be used to generate many things. Reeds can be used that have grown in the wetlands for effective making of many articles. So that is why this livelihood diversification is very much important. Next is how this corporate, council foundation, how can a corporate come together and support the wetland conservation? First is, of course, funds. That is true. But at the same time, there are two other major components that there can be. First is the corporates can themselves be sensitized towards how they are themselves destroying the wetlands. Wetlands are so important for them. They are the kidneys of the world. So even at discharge, if they are so much sensitized that if they just have this zero discharge policy, I think that is the way they can conserve. That's very much important. First, they have to look after themselves. Corporates. Corporates can also play a critical role in having their own knowledge and expertise. Most of the corporates or the industries have got engineers. They can come up with the so-called the solutions of technological development tailored with the indigenous knowledge. They can come together and curate proper solutions for the conservation of the wetlands. With this, I come to an end. So, of course, if you have any questions, please do give and I'll be ready to answer. Thank you.
Dr. Das, I think he has Kaushik Das. You have he had approached all the three aspects that has been put forward to him, how decentralized, participation and decision making can be incorporated to preservation of wetlands, and others is to how we had also been part of destroying the wetlands because most of our developmental projects have come up on wetlands, which I think we, at some point or the other, have been party to it. And he has very rightly pointed out that people who are actually dependent on wetlands will never destroy them because it is their source of their sustenance, and how corporates need to be sensitized to preservation of wetlands as well. So with these things in mind, if there's any questions or any observation relating to his presentation, we can note this down. We can have it at the end again. Now I request Ms. Usha Lachungpal for her work, for her presentation. And as I had talked with her sometime previously, and I think that would be a very interesting work that is working on how indigenous governance systems can support long-term wetland protection, and two other questions that have been put to her. Ma'am, the stage is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy and grateful to Balipara Foundation and Guwahati University for giving me this opportunity again to reach out to students and the younger people, the next generation. I just wanted to begin with asking a question, like how many of you have done any trekking in the mountains? So good, so good. So this is so wonderful. So I'm talking to the right audience. I live in Sikkim. I have been living in Sikkim for the last 40 plus years. And I have tried to trek the state from top to bottom on yak, foot, pony, vehicle, everything. Trying to cross the highest passes and the most difficult areas where even British explorers were not able to go. So I have tried to document the kind of biodiversity, and why it is there is because of the people living there, the indigenous people, whom many people sitting in Gangtok, the capital of Sikkim is Gangtok, which is lowland, quite lowland. They say, I was just telling ma'am, they were saying, one of my forest officers was saying, oh, we should civilize them. And I said, I was saying that these are indigenous people who have lived in the cold desert, places like, we have a piece of Ladakh in Sikkim. And I've been working there on high altitude wetlands. And for that too, I would like to congratulate you all on the occasion of the eve of International Mountain Day, which is tomorrow. And because of the mountains, we have the snow. Because of the snow, we have the glaciers, we have water, continuous water running in our rivers. And now we are talking of development. Now, just talking about that, I wanted to point out, while the speakers were talking, I was having a look at this bottle. It's a little bottle. Water is a free resource. Should be a free resource, a fundamental right. If you can check, this says from the hills of Aravallis, which now the government has decided to eradicate from the face of the planet. And it says from the holy hills of the Taranga range or whatever. And how much does it cost? Can you check? I mean, if anybody is seeing these bottles just drinking and keeping it down, check the price. You will be shocked. More than shocked. Have you seen the price, ma'am? And it is in a small print. The price of this little water bottle, water from wetlands, from a high altitude to a low altitude or from hills, it's 200 rupees for that little bottle. Can you imagine? And how carelessly we treat water, which is the source of all life on Earth. So talking about that, I go back to my glaciers. We had a big Gloff incident in 2023. South Lona Glacier had a big landslide in it, and it broke the Moraine Dam and broke the Tista, the biggest tidal project we had, causing chaos all the way down to Bangladesh. 2 years hence, tourists are still not able to go to the most preferred destination, which is Lake Gurudamwaso, which again, culturally, they say, the Buddhists say that it's like the footprint of Guru Rinpoche, the patron saint of Sikkim. And people are not able to go there even now. So, and the local people, if they are sick, they cannot travel. So, the costs that we are paying in the name of development is being faced by the indigenous communities. So, having said that, it took, in 2011, I had started this, because I used to work earlier with BNHS, the international Ramsar sites. We were trying to get at least some areas in Sikkim declared, because almost every state. Today in India, we have 94 Ramsar sites. There was none in Sikkim, but it took us 14 years. And the main areas which we had decided, which were potential Ramsar sites in Sikkim, again, we were not able to do all of it, because again, Sikkim is on the international border. The army was creating problems. So ultimately, what my chief wildlife warden said, low-hanging fruit. So we have taken a very small lake in West Sikkim called Kichuperi, which Kichuperi has got wish fulfilling, and they have there's a puja that happens there during Maghe Sankranti, that kind of religious significance. Plus, it has got the most ancient peatlands peatlines and biodiversity, like even the black neck crane, for which Bhutan is famous, that has also been photographed there. A lot of migratory birds come there. So that's a very small area which is a Ramsar site in Sikkim. So 14 years to just get one wetland recognized formally. Then coming down to, the other lakes, we have Sikkim it's like a horseshoe, like a giant horseshoe. It is the wettest region in the Himalayas, so we should be having no problems of water. But we do have a lot of problems of water because of all the construction work that's happening, all the roads that are being made in the name of Bharatmala or for national security or for development. Everyone wants a road to their house. We are actually destroying the natural streams, the natural springs. So we have a Dhara Vikas program. Again, we're trying to revive the natural springs, which is again not easy. So all these wetlands are under tremendous amount of stress, and not many people seem to realize it, again because we take water for granted. But again, coming back to the indigenous communities, because I'm this anthropology, so I would like to go out of my comfort zone, or maybe in my comfort zone. The indigenous communities visit high altitude lakes. In East Sikkim, they celebrate all the monks, the shamans, the Jari Butiwalas, the Chakris, where we call them. They all celebrate something called Bhadaure Purnima at Chambule in East Sikkim, all the way to Natula. So it's another dramatic event. And there are lots of stories and folk tales. Then Lake Gurudamar itself, it took us more than 20 years to fight for the lake not to be renamed with a non-native religion. Where there was a Gurudwara constructed there, a religious structure was demolished. It was like a mini Babri Masjid incident that happened. But finally we fought and managed to get the sanctity of the lake back, and still the case is still in court. But it's like how we are fighting for our wetlands from all angles, from the government angle, from the indigenous communities, from the stakeholders of the area, even from the national security point of view. So, and plus these glaciers, glaciers, and those areas also interestingly have hot springs. Can you believe it? Glaciers and hot springs. There are creatures in them, microscopic creatures, that we call extremophiles. Extremophiles have been isolated from glaciers and from hot springs. Now, the researchers who have been studying these glaciers, they have been patenting them, and they can be used in science in a variety of applications. So talking of extremophiles, talking about the Groff incident, talking about geoengineering that has been planned in the post-Groff area, again, all in North Sikkim, very fragile. We have seismic zone 6 now, so very prone to earthquakes, very, very tense situation. But again, the local people, the younger generation is not aware of this. So I can say that, we have in these regions, ecotourism is a big deal for Sikkim. Homestays, ecotourism, we have got yaks in the high altitude. So yak herding is an important livelihood. Ecotourism is a very important livelihood. But with tourism comes garbage management. With garbage management comes stray dog problems, free-ranging dogs killing wildlife. A whole range of issues that come in with non-native people in these sensitive border areas. Indigenous governance is an interesting thing because where other states have got Panchayati Raj, in North Sikkim we have an institution called the Zumsa. And the Zumsa is like the local panchayat. Every year they select their own headman, who is called the Pipan, and they decide all the dates for migration, for grazing, for collecting medicinal plants, for protecting certain areas, from exploitation. It's a very, very strong institution, which is getting slowly diluted. But that institution, the Zumsa, it decides everything, and they actually levy heavy fines on their own people. Then there are all the strategies that we do for balancing piracy, conservation, ecotourism, wetlands, all that has to be done in such a way that Ratin sir was saying that we've got to talk about wetland. What is wetland management? The thing is, some of the wetlands don't need management. They don't need interference. They don't need disturbance. They just need to be left alone. And that is where then we have the water security coming in, So how can we strengthen this? How can we strengthen the local community which is being eroded now? Local people cannot talk. We are standing here talking in English. It's not my language. It's not your language. We are all talking in English. So it's very difficult. So what the Indian Biodiversity Act came in. So we have formed something called a biodiversity management committees, which gives power back to the local people to decide what they can do in their area, and the government is just a part of it. So that needs to be strengthened. With that, they will document their own biodiversity, have their own register, so no one can come from outside and claim intellectual property over it. So that is something really that we need to push, and students should be going out and documenting whatever biodiversity is there in your areas. What is there in the water? What is there on the water? What is there under the water? What is there above the water in the land surrounding it? It's very important for you to know, because these have got monetary value also, not just spiritual and aesthetic value. Monetary value is there, survival value is there. So we have also, I had proposed a cold desert conservation reserve, which is act under the Wildlife Protection Act. We have something called community reserves and conservation reserves. Again, this is an act, this is a law that gives the power to the people to decide how they will look after the wildlife in their areas, and Forest Department and the allied departments are partners in that biodiversity management committee. So these kind of initiatives are there. They need to be strengthened. But again, when we talk about water issues, I'm getting ahead of it. I'll just end with the thing. Now, I already spoke about the challenges we have in the border with waste management, dogs, minefields, landmines in the ground. Grazing areas rapidly being depleted, so yaks have not much to graze. They get trapped in the minefields. So lots of these issues are there, which the herders themselves, they may look, like very poor people. They look with dirty jackets and all, but they are intellectually superior to the scientists who come to them for information, take their information, go and do PhDs, but never share it in such a way that the policy makers can understand and utilize it to protect that area, because that is what is high altitude, that is what is Sikkim, that is what is Himalaya. Just the last thing was, in 23, the government of India started something called as the Amrit Dharohar. This Amrit Dharohar was a 3-year scheme, which means it's finishing next year. And that was a scheme to encourage optimal use of wetlands, enhance biodiversity, carbon stock, ecotourism, and income generation. I don't know how much of it is happening and how much of it needs to happen, but the future is in your hands. I'll keep it for now. Thank you.
And as an anthropologist, we've been studying about the different migratory, seasonal migrations and things like that. So you are someone who's really worked on along with the people. So I find it very interesting, ma'am. And this is identified some very pertinent issues like how political aspects also exist in especially border states, and how the indigenous population have the knowledge and how they must be also used for preservation of the wetlands, and sometimes how tourism industry actually is in our way to enhance the economy of a state can have adverse effects as well. I think this is true even for the northeastern states as well, because in a way, when we're encouraging tourism, we are also bringing along with all the adverse aspects related to tourism also, which sometimes can have a detrimental effect on the indigenous communities, the resources, and also wetlands and other things that we're talking about here. So I think, thank you, ma'am, for your presentation. And I think now we can go for the question answer sessions. We can start with the first speaker. So if you have any questions for Mr. Rinjin, we can take 2 questions, beginning with 2 questions per speaker. Any questions from or any observations? So can I start with one? So I found it very interesting how integrated water resource management has become the core for mitigating climate change. in Bhutan. So what do you think how this can be applicable to our country or state as well?
It really depends in terms of things. For Bhutan, we look like in Sikkim and in other parts of Himalayas, we are a mountain very fragile ecosystem. So when we looked at the climate adaptation issues, it has always been what too much water, like I said, or too less water. So that has been the key, concern. So IWRM actually has provided us a framework for larger adaptation. Even in cities, it's always the issue of flooding. So for us, it has helped, but perhaps I'm sure in Northeast India, I think it's applicable too, because WRM, I'm like principles that everybody knows about it, but one thing that I really like about it is going beyond the district, administrative boundaries and really looking water resource management at the catchment level. That brings the stakeholders more distance. So that has, for Bhutan, I think that's really good. And I'm sure for key areas of Northeast country.
Thank you, sir. Any other question?
Hello. Sir.
Good afternoon. Can we take the other question as well? I think this is a question that can be answered by anybody because it's not specific to one.
Thank you, ma'am, for this question. So, as during my discourse, I spoke that the government and the people and the decision makers, they have to come together. You have the grassroots governance in which all the institutions are there. They have to be made vibrant, in which the people through the Gram Sabha or Palli Sabha, they have to participate and they have to bring the issues. What so happens is that the Gram Sabha itself is not a strength there. The voices never reach to the higher authorities. So when this happens, then there is also the panchayat level. So there are block panchayat samitis and zilla parishads because these are all the people centric. So there is the public administration, there is the people who are in the democratic process, and the so-called the political leaders, they represent actually these people. So when the voices do reach them, to them, and they also participate in this whole of process, decentralized process. Let's say even have the convergence platform with the people, the political parties, and the government. We have such forums at the block levels also. So when they come together, the issues get flagged, they get sensitized, and when they get sensitized, I think these issues would really come up. So even the students like you can play a critical role in playing the role of a catalyst or the change agents. Since you're from this, you can play that role, and whenever you go to the community, when you work with the community, please do think and have these points in your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The case only with wetlands, but with most of the things that we have been dealing with in terms of natural resources and anthropological anthropocentric usage of it. So something that Mr. Das also talked about in terms of wetlands, that how they need to be made productive in certain ways, how different kinds of livelihoods have to be taken up. So my question here is that are we equating natural resources just like we do in the context of human beings, where the existence of natural resources justify themselves only if they are productive or if they are in a way made beneficial in terms of economic activity. Even for that matter, I think one can question the name of the forum itself, where we have nature economics, nature and economics coming together, and where nature may be intertwined, the whole idea of economics playing a role in its very existence. So in the context of wetlands then, how far do you see this humanization of these wetlands, where we are talking about the very existence of wetlands through a sense of productivity, that they need to be made productive, or the people living in and around wetlands need to be engaged in productive activities, and only then maybe we can think of preserving them, as if they can't exist on their own. So that's it. Thank you.
I think that's people living around as well. Would anyone like to take the question?
Yeah, I would like to say that, it's a matter of perspective. The scientists and, the researchers and the students may think in another way. Like Dr. Athin was talking about, the bureaucrat who kind of developed the wheel. The same way, this what the local people are depending on, that economic incentive is there. But it is those same local people who will say, "Ki we want now for," I'll give you an example. In Sikkim, we have a lake called Lampukri. Now, suddenly around that was a beautiful lake, surrounded by forests and everything. Now, if you go today, there are buildings and hotels, and the local people are happy. They are saying, हमारे पास income आ रहा है, tourists are coming. So then they made little huts, then they have barricaded the lake, and they have put boats in it. So people are doing boating, and they are feeling very happy and nice. And they have introduced some goldfish and carp, which are non-native, which will be invasive also at some point. So it is sometimes not just the researchers, and maybe our voice is too small. So the problem with development, how dangerous that word is. We say no development. No, people want that little plastic boat and do some pedaling in that. People want to see fishes. People want to have some slides and swings around. They want cemented structures. One simple example, opposite Gangtok, there is a wildlife sanctuary. It's not a wetland. But in the sanctuary, when we had gone for a survey, this I just shared my personal experience. We to look at Mount Kanchenjunga, which is India's highest peak, very beautiful, the most beautiful. And we were standing, because it was sunny, we were standing under a tree, looking at the glorious view of the mountains. With us was an architect who was recently posted to the forest department. He said, now he has no background, he has no clue, and he has all good intention. He says, sir, हम ऐसे करेंगे, इस पेड़ को काट के यहाँ पे अच्छा सा हवा घर बना देते हैं. What more can we say?
Just reflect on gentleman's question and the narrative that you frame it. This is a very interesting one because that's also the thing that I've been thinking about. When we talk about nature, there is always a suffix that says resources. And in economic terms, resources is something that should be exploited or could be exploited for the so-called development. I don't think human has always negated development. They have always wanted development, but perhaps I think our, let's say, narrative of what development means perhaps being eclipsed by what we wanted to hear from the economic lens. I think that has been the case. So perhaps how do we get around it? I think the critique that you have on this nationomics is a good one. Second, I would like to respond to the lady. I think you really brought up the questions of how we bring this science, conservations and policy aspects together. And that was the same question that I was faced last week when we were having a moderation on. Basically, the criticism was science is finding a place in policy discourse. So how do we create that platform? I think that's very. Sometimes, as a scientist, we are not very good at communicating. We're not basically storytellers. If you want to talk about numbers, I think we're very good at it. We almost go to an extra length to describe numbers in statistical formula. This means nothing to policymakers. So perhaps bridging that communication gap, that's important. And I think again, participation, inclusiveness, I think that has been taught in many forms. I think it comes out again and again. It's similar to gender, social inclusion. I think sometimes we tend to be a bit optimistic. We consult for the sake of consultation to fulfill certain requirement, safeguard. For example, if you're talking about World Bank, UNDP, ADB projects, you need to tick a box. Basically, this is done. So that when there's a problem later on, they have a fallback mechanism to say that, no, this was done. I have to prove. So I think we are being a little bit more optimistic. So I think how do we overcome that? I think that's very important. And again, coming back to we are staged here as an expert, right? Like Dr. Rupan, everyone made quite clear we are not. But how much of us really think through questions of offering a PhD to an expert that's in the communities? I don't think we ever think of it. For us, PhD is a privilege. We want to gain a certificate so that we can sell. So there is an issue, I think, in this, discourse which needs, I think, different perspective and thinking.
Thank you, sir. And some of the people who are doing at the grassroots level. The name of Jadav Payeng comes to me at this moment because he's been like more than maybe 10 PhDs already because he's been working on it for so many years. I think that's very right that we are not really acknowledging the kind of work some people are actually devotedly doing. So, as I have been just said that we are running out of time. So I just like to brief up about, all what we had just seen that the four presenters, but they have all made one thing which is common to all of them when they spoke from different perspectives. But what was the unifying factor was that they were all talking about how participation of the community and how indigenous knowledge is important in understanding the conservation as well as how to manage the wetlands and wetlands, because here we are talking about wetlands, but it is applicable to all our other ecosystems as well. So this is something which we cannot really do without. We need to go back to the communities and understand the biodiversity and understand the knowledge that the indigenous people have about the wetlands and their conservation, and this can be incorporated into the developmental aspects, because yes, we cannot deny that we need development as well, because ultimately people have to sustain. So this, we have to find a path where we are not just preserving the wetlands, but we are also preserving or conserving our earth for the future generations as well. So this is something which I find is very common to all the presenters, that first, we need to understand what we are trying to, what the actual, the biodiversity or the resource, or what we need to understand the system, and then find the solutions to the system from the people who are also engaged in these systems. I think with that, we can come to a conclusion of the session, and I would like to thank each of the speakers for the, as I like the words are used today, the protagonist of the, this show. So, because you have been actually working at the grassroots level, and I really congratulate you and appreciate the work that you've been doing, and I hope this will continue for future as well. And with this, I'd also like to thank the Balipara Foundation for giving me this opportunity to moderate this very interesting session, and something which is actually close to my heart. And I have recently, earlier my work was on animal diseases, but somehow maybe because of the circumstances and all, I have my interest towards climate change and thing is going on, and I have one of my scholars is working, as I had mentioned earlier, in this aspect in Biodiversity Mahasa. So I hope I can carry some and contribute in some way to this direction as well. With this, thank you all for your very lovely audience and the participation, and thank you, speakers.